This is a Restless Music podcast. In 1991, Penny Davies and Roger Ilott wrote a collection of songs for an Australian folk music album, Backbone of the Nation, The Women of Australia. This podcast is based around the songs from that album. The women have played an important role in Australia's history since white settlement in 1788. Their stories are not often told. This podcast focuses on a few of the unsung heroines, the not-so-famous and the obscure women of our past from 1788 to contemporary times. For at least 60,000 years there were women in this country, and their lives are recorded in their own oral traditions and ceremonies. The arrival of the British was the end of the world as the Indigenous people had known it. As Oodgeroo Noonuccal wrote in We Are Going.
We are as strangers here now, but the white tribe are the strangers. We belong here. We are the old ways. We are the corroboree and the Bora ground. We are the old sacred ceremonies, the laws of the elders. We are the wonder tales of the dream time, the tribal legends told. We are the past.
You are listening to Backbone of the Nation, The Women of Australia, Part 1, from the arrival of the First Fleet through settlement and expansion of the colony.
White women first came to live in the colony of New South Wales, now known as Australia, on the First Fleet, which landed in January 1788. The 11 ships carried an estimated 775 convicts, including 193 women. During the voyage, at night and during storms, the female convicts were kept below decks with the hatches fastened. However, the bulkheads were broken down so that the women could fraternise with the sailors. Presumably it was the sailors who broke the bulkheads down, but the women were blamed. Lieutenant Ralph Clark wrote in his log,
I could never have thought that there were so many abandoned wenches in England. They are 10 times worse than the male convicts.
Later, when some of the women on board Clark's ship were moved to other ships to make room for sheep at Cape Town, he wrote,
I am sure we will find the sheep more agreeable shipmates than the women.
There are a couple of myths about female convicts. The innocent maiden who was wrongly convicted and the totally immoral depraved hag. It would appear that these myths were invented and propagated by male writers. The truth lies somewhere in between. Only a small number would have been old lags or juvenile delinquents, and very few were totally innocent. Most were poor women, unlucky enough to be caught in a petty crime or forced into prostitution by circumstance. According to the book Australian Pioneer Women by Eve Pownell, these tough rural lassies and city prostitutes were a lively, sometimes unadmirable, but eminently likeable lot.
We're down on our luck and we're feeling no pain. We're drowning in gin and falling in sin, and the chaplain can lecture in vain, 'cause we're the ones wearing the chains. Polly, Ruby and me, we're in the same boat on the same endless sea. We know we did wrong and our sentence is long, but I don't think we'll ever be free. We're down on our luck and we're feeling no pain. We're drowning in gin and falling in sin, and the chaplain can lecture in vain, 'cause we're the ones wearing the chains. Jane, Ruby and I. If wishes had wings, then we three would fly. We've led a hard life of trouble and strife, but we don't waste our time asking why. We're down on our luck and we're feeling no pain. We're drowning in gin and falling in sin, and the chaplain can lecture in vain, 'cause we're the ones wearing the chains. Me and Polly and Jane, 8 months on this cattle boat out on the main. When we get to shore, we might bless the law that sent us to Botany Bay. We're down on our luck and we're feeling no pain. We're drowning in gin and falling in sin, and the chaplain can lecture in vain, 'cause we're the ones wearing the chains. We're down on our luck and we're feeling no pain. We're drowning in gin and falling in sin, and the chaplain can lecture in vain, 'cause we're the ones wearing the chains. We're the ones wearing the chains.
On arrival in the colony, some convict women managed to improve their lot through fortunate marriages. Many did, in fact, eventually bless the law that sent them to Botany Bay. The Second Fleet brought 6 ships to the colony of New South Wales. On board the Lady Juliana was the convicted thief Rachel Turner. Rachel, a 28-year-old servant transported for 7 years for stealing from her employer, was to become a wealthy and well-respected member of the community. Her memorial tablet graces the wall of St Luke's Anglican Church in Liverpool, New South Wales. The tablet reads,
"She was the most affectionate and virtuous wife, a tender mother, and ever kind to the poor."
It was placed there by her husband Thomas Moore and bears the name Mrs. Thomas Moore. The full story of Rachel shows a woman of character and resilience, a tale far more remarkable than the tablet's description as the kindly wife of Thomas Moore and mother of his children.
Her name was Rachel Turner, 28 years old, stole from her employer 200 years ago. On the Lady Juliana, she came to Botany Bay, and she lived in New South Wales until she passed away. But the tablet on the church reads Mrs. Thomas Moore. It says she was a virtuous wife and ever tender mother. It says she worshipped in the church and was kind to all the poor, but it doesn't say a word about the life she knew before. She lived with Surgeon White, bore her man a son. 4 years they lived together till his duty tour was done. Then he went back to England while she grieved on Sydney shore. He'd arranged a marriage for her with Mr. Thomas Moore. And the tablet on the church reads Mrs. Thomas Moore. It says she was a virtuous wife and ever tender mother. It says she worshipped in the church and was kind to all the poor, but it doesn't say a word about the life she knew before. Thomas was a carpenter, a well-respected man, and they built a home Rachel had more children and a life within the law, as a lady and a good wife, as Mrs. Thomas More. And the tablet on the church reads Mrs. Thomas More. It says she was a virtuous wife and ever tender mother. It says she worshipped in the church and was kind to all the poor. But it doesn't say a word about the life she knew before. Her name was Rachel Turner, 28 years old. Stole from her employer 200 years ago. On the Lady Juliana, she came to Botany Bay, and she lived in New South Wales until she passed away. But the tablet on the church reads Mrs. Thomas More. It says she was a virtuous wife and ever tender mother. It says she worshipped in the church and was kind to all the poor. But it doesn't say a word about the life she knew before. It doesn't say her name, just Mrs. Thomas More.
Elizabeth Macquarie was the second wife of Lachlan Macquarie, who from 1810 to 1821 served as the 5th Governor of New South Wales. Elizabeth played a significant role in the establishment of the colony and is recognised in the naming of many Australian landmarks. Her husband, Lachlan Macquarie, had a leading role in the social, economic and architectural development of the colony. He is considered by historians to have had a crucial influence on the transition of New South Wales from a penal colony to a free settlement. By Macquarie's time, ex-convict and free women were beginning to make their mark on the penal colony. Families developed, and women brought teaching, nursing, and other civilizing influences to the colony. Thus women began to provide a settling influence, which greatly improved the brutal caste system of soldiers and convicts. A respectable free single woman, Eliza Walsh, was one of the first to fight for women's rights in New South Wales. Eliza requested a grant of land to run her cattle. Governor Macquarie regularly gave grants to male convicts, juvenile wards of the state, and to married women, but he refused Eliza's request, saying that spinsters, whom he called ladies, should not hold land. Eliza took him on and won.
Eliza Walsh was a single woman with cattle and a bit of land. She wrote to Governor Macquarie asking for a further grant. Macquarie had the power to give grants of land to babies, but when he saw Eliza's letter he replied,
"No land for ladies."
"No land for ladies, no, not if they were alone." Macquarie couldn't bear a spinster coping on her own. No land for ladies, no, but Eliza found a way to better the position of the women of Macquarie's day. A commissioner was in New South Wales to investigate Macquarie. Eliza made a case, but Commissioner Big was sorry. He had no authority to force the governor's hand, but he advised her to continue with her requests for land. No land for ladies, no, not if they were alone. Macquarie couldn't bear a spinster coping on her own. No land for ladies, no, but Eliza found a way to better the position of the women of Macquarie's day. Eliza then took up her quill, their prejudice incensed her, and asked that circumstance of sex should not be held against her, and higher powers upheld their claims against the ruling males. But spinsters could hold property in colonial New South Wales. No land for ladies, no, not if they were alone. Macquarie couldn't bear a spinster coping on her own. No land for ladies, no, but Eliza found a way to better the position of the women of Macquarie's day. Eliza Walsh was a single woman with cattle and a bit of land. She wrote to Governor Macquarie asking for a further grant. Macquarie had the power to give grants of land to babies, but when he saw Eliza's letter he replied,
No land for ladies.
no land for ladies, no, not if they were alone. Macquarie couldn't bear a spinster coping on her own. No land for ladies, no, but Eliza found a way to better the position of the women of Macquarie's day. No land for ladies, no, not if they were alone. Macquarie couldn't bear a spinster coping on her own. No land for ladies, no, but Eliza found a way to better the position of the women of Macquarie's day.
The first female factory was established on the second floor of the jail, which had been built at Parramatta in 1802. 80 small rooms were allocated to female convicts. The factory was for women who had not been immediately assigned to masters upon arrival in New South Wales. They were considered the worst women, or intractables. A second female factory was completed by 1821. It was a place where, according to John Pilger,
Victorian penal experts were testing their exciting new theories.
The treadmill or treadwheel was introduced in 1823 as an implement of punishment and torture.
There was nothing to sleep on, only boards and stone and straw, and filthy wool full of ticks and spiders. All the women underwent solitary confinement. Their heads were shaved and they were locked in total darkness with the haunting whine of mosquitoes.
Here, women walked in the treadmill, which was connected to a flour mill or water pump, for many hours a day without rest.
Circle dance of women's woes, pump the water, mill the flour, tread the mill hour after hour. We can't get off the turning mill when all we want is to be still. They threaten us with whip and curse, though our pains grow worse and worse. Round and round the treadmill goes, circle dance of women's woes, pump the water, mill the flour, tread the mill hour after hour. What mind devised this torture mill to punish us and break our will? Endless footsteps day by day we tread the months and years away. Round and round the treadmill goes, circle dance of women's woes, pump the water, mill the flour, tread the mill hour after hour. We can't get off the turning mill when all we want is to be still. They threaten us with whip and curse, though our pains grow worse and worse. Round and round the treadmill goes, circle dance of women's woes, pump the water, mill the flour, tread the mill hour after hour. Round and round the treadmill goes, circle dance of women's woes, pump the water, mill the flour, tread the mill hour after hour.
colony were convict servants or wives, many lived outside of the home on the Wallaby Track with travelling menfolk. There were women working as drovers and shepherds, and there was Miss McTavish of Duntroon, a bullock driver, who was only discovered to be a woman when she fell and broke her ribs. Others on the outskirts of society found a life on the run as bushrangers. Jessie Hickman, Mrs. Winter, and Mary Ann Bugg, also known as Mrs. Thunderbolt, were infamous in their time. In Van Diemen's Land, now Tasmania, an Indigenous woman, Mary Cockerill, known to the white chroniclers as Black Mary, was bushranger Michael Howe's common-law wife. She had a tragic tale to tell about her own so-called hero of the bush. Some reports say that Howe shot his wife because she was slowing him down. Others say that he injured Mary by accident. However, she did help the police to track him down, and the actual story will most likely never be known.
Black Mary and Michael Howe, the bold bushranger, wandered the wild mountains of Tasmania. Mary loved and cared for Michael many years on the run, and hoped they'd be together when their outlaw days were done. Mary, Black Mary, betrayed by her love, you'll be sorry, Michael Howe, that you wounded your black dove. Mary found bush food for them and filled their tucker bags. She led them safely through the bush and carried a heavy swag. She found 100 hideouts for Michael and his men, and listened to them brag as if their freedom would never end. Mary, Black Mary, betrayed by her love, you'll be sorry, Michael Howe, that you wounded your black dove. A troop of mounted policemen came out from Hobart Town. The gang split up to make it hard for the traps to hunt them down. But the police were closing in on them, and Michael drew his gun to shoot Black Mary down. Two couldn't go as fast as one. Mary, Black Mary, betrayed by her love, you'll be sorry, Michael Howe, that you wounded your black dove. Came. She told them Michael's hideouts and cursed her lover's name. They found him, he surrendered, and then betrayed his gang to save himself, the bastard, so he wouldn't have to hang. Mary, Black Mary, betrayed by her love, you'll be sorry, Michael Howe, that you wounded your black dove. Mary, Black Mary, betrayed by her love, you'll be sorry, Michael Howe, that you wounded your black dove. You'll be sorry, Michael Howe, that you wounded your black dove.
From Sydney and other settlements, the population spread out further into the bush. Women walked or followed bullock teams on horseback to remote places where farms were cut out of the bush by the combined efforts of beast, man, woman and child. Some, like the German women who came to South Australia to escape religious persecution in their homeland, thanked their God for the freedom they found there. Women shearers were the norm in the German-settled districts of South Australia. As former Cheshire dairy farmer John Rathall Bull wrote in his memoir in the mid-1800s,
the shearers were principally young women. The men of the village caught and carried the sheep to the shearer. The sheep was carefully laid down on its side. The young woman, without shoes and stockings, had a piece of thick, soft string tied to one of her big toes. The other end was then tied to the hind foot of the sheep. Her knee, or left hand, was pressed on the neck or shoulder of the animal. She commenced clipping, most carefully avoiding any snips of the skin. At first I was inclined to laugh, but I was soon pleased to see how tenderly the sheep were handled.
We came out here from Germany to farm the great Southland, to make us whole again, my exiled family, to work the rich dark soil and earn our daily bread. I shear the sheep with tender care, ploughing harness with the mare. As I work the land, I learn to love her stranger's ways. I weave and sew when evening comes. I read the book and pray for rain, and hear the cool whisper of the gums, and face with joy the months till harvest home. I shear the sheep with tender care, ploughing harness with the mare. As I work the land, I learn to love a stranger's ways. I cut the logs to feed the fire. When winter blasts the windy hills, I work till dark, but never tire. I hear the goat bells ring as the sun goes down. I shear the sheep with tender care, ploughing harness with the mare. As I work the land, I learn to love a stranger's ways. I shear the sheep with tender care, ploughing harness with the mare. As I work the land, I learn to love a stranger's ways. As I work the land, I learn to love a stranger's ways.
While white women of the colony were carving out lives for themselves, they often suffered great loneliness. Others found their strength and courage in the isolation of the bush. Meanwhile, Aboriginal women were finding their way of life becoming almost impossible. If they lived near white settlements, they were driven out, removed, or taken on as badly paid servants. Some were kidnapped, as in the case of a large number of women in Van Diemen's Land. They were taken from their people and used as slaves by white sealers from the early to mid-1800s. An Indigenous 12-year-old girl named Kalungu was stolen from her home country on South Australia's Fleurieu Peninsula around 1830. George Augustus Robinson interviewed Kalungu after her rescue. She had been dumped by slave owner William Dutton on a tiny island in Bass Strait and was brought to Flinders Island by Robinson in early 1837. She was by then about 20 years old. Robinson had the job of rounding up Tasmania's Indigenous people and exiling them on Flinders Island in Bass Strait in the early 1830s. Ironically, in 1839 he would become the chief protector of Aborigines in the Port Phillip district, which became Victoria. Kalungu told Robinson of being kidnapped by sealers during a raid.
They tied me up, took me to Kangaroo Island and sold me to Bill Dutton. Them sealers beat us women plenty. They cut flesh off a woman's buttock, cut off a boy's ear with sealers' knives. He died. They used to tie us up and beat us with ropes. Bill Dutton called me wife, beat me plenty. I had my daughter, then he took her and went back to Launceston. Later, Mr. Robinson brought me and my little boy Johnny to Port Phillip, taught me about Jesus, made me a housemaid.
In the early 19th century, around Tasmania's shores, the sealing men pursued the skins that wealthy women wore. They lived among the islands in rough bark huts or caves, and they kidnapped Aborigines and kept the women slaves. Slaves, slaves, the sealers kept them slaves, far from the Australian mainland and the law. Brave men who sail the ocean waves, the dark eyes of the seals and women haunt them in their graves. Dressed in frocks of wallaby skin from the chilling break of day, the women worked the sealing boats and tried to break away. They were flogged and raped and beaten, underfed and scared. Some took a chance in the ocean instead of living with despair. Slaves, slaves, the sealers kept them slaves, far from the Australian mainland and the law. Brave men who sailed the ocean waves, the dark eyes of the seals and women haunt them in their graves. Some were young and strong. Secretly they shared their pain and sang their women's songs. And if they tried to fight, the armed men would always win. And many brought forth children with a pale and ghostly skin. Slaves, slaves, the sealers kept them slaves, far from the Australian mainland and the law. Brave men who sailed the ocean waves, the dark eyes of the seals and women haunt them in their graves. The Quaker man discovered them and he came to set them free. The women were so terrified of men they wouldn't leave, but at last they brought their children out, laughing with relief, as they sailed away from the islands in years of fear and grief. Slaves, slaves, the sealers kept them slaves, far from the Australian mainland and the law. Brave men who sailed the ocean waves, the dark eyes of the seals and women haunt them in their graves. Slaves, slaves, the sealers kept them slaves, far from the Australian mainland and the law. Brave men who sailed the ocean waves, the dark eyes of the seals and women haunt them in their graves. The dark eyes of the seals and women haunt them in their graves.
been listening to Backbone of the Nation, The Women of Australia, Part 1.